Ladies and gentlemen, this is Verity Seeker. My name's Mark Powls, and our guest today is, you're the first candidate to officially announce your candidacy for Kansas governor. This is Stacy Rogers.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's good that you came all the way over to Garnett.
Hey, yeah, I love it. I love it. Everywhere in the state is important. So
yeah, well, now we know that you will actually come around and talk to us, small town people.
Absolutely.
So it has a lot to say for these candidates that'll take the time to, hop out of the big city and see what the rural county folks, are doing and what our concerns are. So we appreciate it.
Well, I'm sort of a big city girl. I was born in Wichita, but I was raised in Newton and lived in Mount Hope for 15 years. So I'm more of a smaller town girl at heart.
Okay.
Myself, so.
Okay, that's good. Once a small town girl, always a small town girl, no matter where you are, right?
That's right.
And that's good. That means you're in touch with blue collar workers and as well as, the city folks. It's you have to be kind of a well-rounded individual in order to, represent the entire state.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I was born on the south side of Wichita on a dirt road. So it was a little bit different than, especially back in that time, a little bit different than what Wichita looks like today. So
wow. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying dirt roads, and you mentioned the word time.
Mm-hmm. Time.
So you know where this is going. So then Newton, and then any schooling beyond, kindergarten, high school.
Mm-hmm. No, well, a little bit, but no, I do not have a college degree, and I think that has actually served me well throughout my life. I think that everything that I've worked for has come up a different way and has taught me a lot more life lessons than what I would have received going through and pursuing a degree. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, some people assume that if you don't get a college degree these days in our modern times that you're never going to make it. You have to get that degree and to be somebody.
I am a case in point where that is absolutely not true.
Wow. So
okay. I will fight that one.
Okay. All right. So now on your Facebook page at some point, ladies and gentlemen, I do troll candidates, not in a negative way, but, I do a little bit, because I'm a voter. Okay. I'm a Republican and I have run for office. So I kind of know how things work, right. And I find that, like we talked a little bit beforehand about, how people vote.
Right.
And we kind of want to make sure that we vote intelligently and some things about the person and their character and who they are rather than appearance or, what their stature is or where they came from or what kind of college education they might have had.
Right.
Or even experience in government.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I have a feeling that people most of the time will vote for personality over principle.
Right. Yeah.
And therefore, this is what we get, right?
Right, right.
Has that worked out for us, Stacy?
No.
So what's your opinion on that?
I would say that while I am very well liked when I meet people for the first time, but that is not necessarily what I want people to vote for me on. I've built up relationships throughout my businesses. I have multiple businesses and relationships with people over the years that because of those relationships and they know who I am as a person, they are very supportive of me now and know, I guess my track record in what I have done has proven that when I say I'm going to do something, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Versus sometimes we get people that look all shiny and really well polished, and they really don't intend to do what they say they're going to do. And I think that is a big difference between me and a lot of other people. I am very well liked. I think that goes, the reason why I'm well liked is because I am trustworthy, and the people that know me, they've seen how I've treated them, how I've treated others, how I've run my businesses, how I've worked in the community, how important my community is to me. And that speaks a lot bigger volume than, do I say the right things? Do I look the right way? So.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that point, we scheduled this for 1:30 and she was here an hour early in town.
I did.
Ready
I
to
check
go.
the town out, too.
Yeah, she keeps her promises, and just like any employer looking for a hire, employers are looking for employees that will not clock in right at the time that they're supposed to be productive, but they'd kind of like you to show up 15 minutes early. That's what my understanding is in my experience. So when somebody shows up early, that shows respect for the person that's asking you to do something like here, an interview. And I was excited about that. I was still eating.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh my gosh, I need to hurry up and get around.
No worries.
But, okay. So now I did see something on your Facebook page. I always look at the person's profile, and you had something on there about Bethel College. Were you associated with Bethel College in any way?
So I did. I attended some college classes when I was younger. I actually went to Hutch Community College and to Bethel.
Oh.
I just never achieved a degree in, I was in accounting. I was in accounting and took some IT classes, but that was just more for my own benefit than, really pursuing a degree in that.
So really, it's not really, I hate to say, okay, I'm not dissing college education. No. I'm just saying that you went to the college level to get the things you needed to do what you do.
Right.
Who cares about the degree? Is that kind of
I was actually pursued to become an English professor of all things, and I just thought that would be the most boring career on the planet, so I did not want to do that. That did not appeal to me. English professors are amazing, but I'm just saying it did not appeal to me personally. But yes, I was pursued for that, and decided that was not the direction that I wanted to go with my life. So
okay, so IT stuff, technical stuff, and then the kind of accounting, business administrative type.
Yes.
And so how did that education steer you in the direction you are at now? You mentioned multiple businesses.
Yeah. So I became an entrepreneur. I think I always had that entrepreneurial spirit very young. I don't know that I necessarily understood that is what I would end up eventually doing. But I really, somebody that really resonated with me right out of high school, the first time that I got to vote, was Ross Perot. And Ross Perot
I voted for him.
Yes, was a businessman, and what he said resonated with me. And I wasn't even thinking in that business mindset at that point, but I just knew that what he said made sense to me more so than what I was hearing from other politicians at that time. And so, as going forward, today we have people like Vivek, Donald Trump, and a lot of them, again, what they say business-wise resonates with me a lot more than what I hear coming from other politicians. Mm-hmm. And so, those things that I was drawn to back then have helped me today, because obviously accounting is very important to understand, taxes and budgeting and, all of those kind of things, all that business administration. But I think that everything that I pursued, I can look back and to what I'm doing today and say, this is what I learned from that experience that I can apply to what I'm doing today. So there's a lesson in every single experience you have. And sometimes you'll go through something and you're like, why did this even occur? Why was I even put in this place? And, 20 years from now, it may click into focus of why you went through that experience. It may seem completely meaningless at the time, but there's a purpose. There's
Yeah.
a purpose for everything we experience.
And throughout that process, did you ever, take a fall and have to pick yourself up and wonder, why is this happening to me?
More times than I can count. I don't think that you can become a good business person or successful without failing lots and lots and lots of times. And there's a popular phrase called failing forward, and I'm not like into those little catchy phrases that much, but it's one that really does apply. I think that how you succeed is the measure by which you fail. Pick yourself back up and learn from that experience. And so you can, if everything was handed to you and you never failed at anything, I think you learn far less. And that's where we end up with more entitled behaviors than somebody who has fallen multiple times and had to pivot and take another direction, or figure out what, why did I fail that time? What can I fix and make this better next time?
At any time during your fall, did you ever think it was government that caused your fall, or was it just a mistake? Or is it a combination of both?
I don't know. I would have to go back and analyze that to decide whether or not government was, part of the issue. I think that, as we see things going today, we're at a breakneck pace in our society that is not sustainable. I know a lot of businesses are now suffering and trying to tread water to keep going. And with the rising costs of things, with excess regulations, excess taxation, all of those things, it makes it very difficult to run a successful small business in this state or in this country. And so I think that while some of my earlier failures were probably more personal, more of that learning curve of who I was and what my limitations are and what I didn't know and needing to learn the things I needed to know. I think now I would say that they're more related to those actual, regulations and taxing and how to try and maximize the dollar that we have to spend and making that last throughout the year. I'm in the event industry, and so that's a very volatile industry. I own a venue, and the event industry itself is just a very up and down. It's feast or famine all the time, and you learn some of those trends and can prepare for them. But when you have, last year our insurance doubled. And we're not talking, when we're talking about, liability insurance and building insurance, and liquor insurance and food and, all of those things that are lumped in there together, it went from $20,000 to $40,000. That's a huge jump. And there's not a lot of businesses that can handle, that kind of monetary hit. And so, those are all things that we have to look at and say, why, first of all, why is this occurring? And what can we do about it? I'm not sure that I have all the answers to that yet, but those are things that will be top of my list to be looking at. So one thing I learned, which I'll get into another topic that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, sure.
I was on the city council for Mount Hope for 6 years. Quite a few years ago. But during that time, one of the biggest lessons, that was one of those things where I was like, why did I end up in this position? What was the purpose of me doing this? It was in the middle of me raising small children. I really had never had any political experience before. Suddenly, this is what I was doing. And I was the water commissioner of all things, so I had no idea what to do with water. And I didn't really understand why I was put there, and then I never touched politics again for a number of years. And it makes a lot more sense now, because one of the biggest lessons that I learned in that experience was, as the general public, we have ideas of, well, let's do this and it will fix the problem. But once you are in that position, you see the entire picture. There are things that, regardless of Open Records Acts, regardless of anything, there is private information that cannot be shared with the public. And because of that, the general public does not get the entire picture. Whether I agree with that or not is beyond the point. But what I learned is that once I had the entire picture, I realized very quickly that while somebody may say, well, let's just do this and it's going to fix my problem, it may cause a problem for an entire other group of people. And so you really have to weigh, that cost. Is this going to improve more, or is it going to overall make life harder for people? And you just have to weigh that out. And so saying, I'm really, really very cautious in what I say I can fix and what I can't fix, because I don't want at any time for somebody to come back and say, well, you said you would do this. And then when I get behind that desk and realize there's a reason why we can't do this exact thing, we may be able to do something similar or work around or make some adjustments to make it beneficial for the maximum amount of people. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to be able to do everything for everyone, and cause both, without causing both benefit and harm to groups of people. And so I think I have to be very cautious with that. I think it's disingenuous when politicians get up and say, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to change this, vote for me, I'm going to do it all, because that's not the truth. It's just not possible to do that. I can't make a promise to people in Western Kansas and tell them I'm going to fix something for them, when in fact it would hurt Sedgwick County, Johnson County, or even people here in Garnett. I don't know, no item specifically that I'm thinking of, but I can't say that and then come over to Sedgwick County and say, well, I'm going to fix this for you. Whereas that same thing, those may contradict each other. Mm-hmm. So it's a balancing game, and one that has to be taken with a lot of thoughtfulness and respect for the people of the state. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. For me, it's, I'm adding to what you said. Now you tell me if you disagree.
Okay.
Okay. All I'm doing is I agree with everything you said there. People vote for the person who says that they're going to save their life. I'm going to protect your life, or I'm going to make your children this or that, or I'm going to make sure your company is this and you have this, and so on and so forth. True. A million different ways.
Right.
And like you said, that's what politicians do.
Right.
Like for the next 2 years, that's what they're going to do.
Absolutely.
I guarantee it. And, like myself here, I've studied state and federal constitutions and the founding and all that kind of stuff, and even teach classes on it. Never at any time does the Constitution grant the government, any governor or legislator, the power or the jurisdiction or the right to save your life.
Right.
Or to make this happen for you or that or
right.
whatever, build up your business or whatever. It has nothing to do with it. The one that gets me is, we're going to create jobs, right?
Right.
And about the only thing that government can do is to work together. Say if you're elected governor and you've got cooperative people in the legislature, is work together with this document, we call it Constitution. Absolutely. And it has these 20 protected rights. And you go, what we're going to do is we're going to obey these protected rights and just make sure that the environment is safe for you to do this.
Exactly.
We're not going to get in your way.
Right.
And we're just going to manage the government to the extent we can.
Exactly. Yes.
And to me, that's like, I wish they would actually behave that way.
Right. Right.
But like we both know, there are people out there, many, and they're voters that don't think that way.
Right.
They want government to spoon feed them everything. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
And it makes it difficult for people like you and other legislators that want to get in there and try to help.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it is very difficult to, again, balance that, because there is always going to be that segment of the population that says we want the government to step in and make these decisions for us. I don't think that that's what our country was founded on. It was for freedom. It was for our liberty, our decision making. We're smart people. We can make these decisions. And there's a lot of things that the government needs to get out of the way and let us make those decisions. Mm-hmm. So I am very much for smaller government. I'm for not standing in the way of the people. I think that more times than not, instead of it truly helping, it ends up harming in the process, especially when we're talking about, businesses and getting in the way of businesses and innovation and being able to grow something. What that ends up doing when we get in the way of those, it ends up making our costs go higher, and that's passed on to the consumer. Mm-hmm. So we're harming the people by letting the government control more. And so we need to just step out of the way with a lot of things.
Yeah. How do you feel as a potential governor with the taxation of your house and the assessment of the value of your house that keeps going up and up because the government needs more money?
Right.
I
think in general we're overtaxed on multiple fronts. So not just our property. We're taxed on our income, and then we're taxed when we spend it. We're taxed for not just our house or our land, but then we're taxed on our vehicles. We're taxed on, if you have a boat, if you have, we're taxed on literally everything, whether or not it's paid off. There's an argument out there, once it's paid off, why are we being taxed on it anymore? Why are we having to pay every year? There's a lot of ways to address that, as far as who should be taxed, how much they should be taxed. Right now, we're taxing our seniors out of their homes. And, their homes, some of them, their homes have been paid for years and years, and now they can't afford the property tax on them. Well, that's just despicable. It should not be occurring. And so I think there's a lot of things that are rolled into our property taxes that we need to be looking at, why we're rolling them into our property taxes, and that's the way that we are taxing people. And this is a much larger discussion, probably for another day. But things like how much of our budget is going towards education, and how that is taxed on every citizen, regardless of whether you have a child going to school or not. And while I do agree that our children are our future, and we all have a responsibility to foster that education, I think that there is a misuse of those funds occurring right now, and there are ways to shift that and create a savings for the citizens of the state while still educating our students far better than what's occurring right now. And so, this is a multifaceted question. A lot of different things go into it, and there's a lot of different ways to attack different kinds of taxation that's occurring to our residents.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
You're thinking about that.
Right.
Okay, so
right.
That's on your mind, and
Absolutely.
If you're traveling around speaking to people, which you are, it's one of the first things that property tax issue. There's going to be a solution.
Property and income tax are
yes.
the two big ones. Yeah.
Personal property.
Yeah. Personal
basically.
property.
Yeah. I'm going to bounce around.
Sure.
I'm going to keep you on your toes.
That's fine.
Let's bounce back to your family.
Okay.
Okay, so you have all boys in your family and a husband, right?
All boys, yes.
Do you want to say anything about that family? Or I have a feeling they're not very political.
They're not very political, so they like to stay in the background. So I'll say a little bit about them. I'll say how old they are.
Okay, sorry.
So
a little bit
I have a 31-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 21-year-old. So they're all 5 years apart, which is fun. I think the most interesting thing about that is they're all incredibly different from each other. And I always tell them each of you had a different mom because I was a very different age at each time when I had them and had learned different things. So, but my oldest is an accountant. So that's kind of where that comes from, where I enjoyed that. And I said, I was in college at that time when I was pregnant with you, and maybe some of that rubbed off. And that's why you're an accountant today.
I don't know. The gene there somewhere.
And then my youngest is actually a diesel mechanic. And so very wildly different career pursuits.
Yeah.
And two of my boys are also disabled. So we have traversed some interesting things over the years, and my middle son has autism, so that's
getting more and more common, by the way.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic to get into. I have about 20 years of health experience, about 20 years of health experience, and I'm very much I'm thankful that it's being brought to the forefront of our conversation these days, because it's something that I've our food integrity and our and medications. I worked in pharmacy for 15 years. I've worked in a hospital, and then just working with my son with autism that through diet and versus all the medications that they like to apply on children with disabilities. He's one of the few people in the state that is not on a basket full of prescriptions. And I did that intentionally. I'm very much of the thought process of let's find the cause. Let's find the root of what is going on, whether it be a health problem or whatever, versus Band-Aiding it with a medication to just mask the symptoms. So, yeah. So that's a big conversation. I could talk about that all day.
Well, and I could have a conversation about that all day.
I could come back another time. We could talk about that on another podcast.
I am brutal to the medical and pharmaceutical and insurance agency, and I'm just brutal.
Yeah.
But I think we can do better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we can do lots better. Yeah. And I've been fighting that, the food integrity, since about 2004.
Wow.
And if you remember, 2005 is when the new rules came in that they had to list allergens on food labels. Prior to that, I would be calling companies and having to dissect their food labels and talk with their chemists, and it was a whole process to just get to the answers of whether this food was something that I could give to my child or not. So so there's a lot there, but
and there's all kinds of questions popping into my head. I'll just hold off.
So the only other thing I want to say about my children is they're all fantastic human beings. I'm very proud of each and every one of them, but I was a public school mom, a private school mom, and a homeschool mom. So
wow.
I've done all that. We've done a lot of tutoring. So I'm also very well versed when it comes to school issues and what I see works and does not work in this state as well. So that's a big topic for me too, which is school choice.
I have a feeling you're going to be back into my studio 4 or 5 times.
Yes, I would be happy to. We have lots to talk about. So.
Wow. Why would you want to run for governor for the state of Kansas? Why ruin your life?
Oh, I get this question a lot. The first time that I said it out loud, which was actually the first time I ever thought about it, was the day that Governor Kelly said that people could change their sex on their driver's license. And I was frustrated already. I'd been watching all this stuff, a lot of other things, all through COVID, like the rest of us. But at that point in time, I was standing in my living room. I threw my hands up and I just said, I can't take any more of this. I'm going to have to go be governor. And never before that had that thought been in my head at all. Yes.
For a minute there, I just pictured that happening, and though everybody goes,
I can't deal with this.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and the point was not so much. I mean, I don't know how many times a day do you look at your driver's license? Is this really an issue that truly matters and will affect the lives of the people in this state? And the answer to that is no. I mean, the number of people that actually see your driver's license that would even notice that, the number of times we personally look at our it's just such a non-issue. It was a bit on the ridiculous side for me. And I just felt there were so many other things that our governor could have been actually paying attention to and addressing that would make a real difference in the lives of the people that live here. And instead, she was using her time to do that. And at that moment, when I said those words out loud, that I'm just going to have to go be governor, I felt it imprinted on my heart. It was there and it was not going away. Uh-oh. And I knew it at that moment, it was not going to go away. And so I am a woman of faith. And I said, well, if this is what's supposed to happen, I'm going to have some big signs pointing me in that direction. And, I started talking with some people, and I'd talk about why I threw my hands up in my living room and said that. And they'd kind of giggle for a second. And then they'd look at me a little bit and they'd say, it might not be such a bad idea. And so
that's one.
I thought about it. And I kind of set it off to the side. And I had in my head, well, I won't do it this time, not for 26. I'll wait till the next election cycle because I don't know enough. How could I possibly do this job well? I need to learn. And it was brought back into my focus so this was in September of 23. In December of 23, it was brought back into my focus. And I started having some conversations again. And at that point in time, I had mentioned, well, I'm not going to do it this time. I'll do it next time. And instead I was told, no, you should do it this time.
This is from a human, not
from
a spirit.
From a human, that's okay. Correct. From a human. Several humans that I talked to know that this was a good time to do this. And so I started to, again, kind of have more conversations and just pray about it and really just seek what I was supposed to be doing. And I had a conversation in May of this year with someone with a little more knowledge about how the whole process works. And he kind of threw some things out at me. I think he was trying to dissuade me. But the interesting thing is that most of those things I had already thought about completely on my own 100% and had already started to lay plans out. And I said, okay, instead of him dissuading me, he's confirming me. And so I made the decision in May of 24 that this is what I was going to pursue. I filed my treasurer in September and started the process. So that's where we're at today, really. But the thought process has never left. I did have people who tried to dissuade me and would say, well, why don't you run for representative or run for Senate or do something like that? Instead, I've even had some people who have been less than kind who say things, why don't you do something a little more attainable for you? And I would kindly say, I'll go home and pray about that and think about that. Oh, and I would, because I'm a woman of faith, and I would go home and pray about it. And I just felt like, no, where I was this is the path that you're supposed to be taking. Now, I know I've heard this 100 times that every candidate comes in and says, God told me to do this. And the difference is that that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that God is telling me to take this path. Whether this path ultimately leads to that governor's seat or not is irrelevant at this point. But I believe that there is something that I am to accomplish And the goal is to be in that seat, but it may not be what I accomplish along the way. And I've always been somewhat of a disruptor and an outsider for sure. And what I've noticed throughout those experiences in my life where I've come into a situation, maybe been put into a position of leadership or a position where I had a voice, and I was usually ahead of my time, and I was usually saying things that scared people. And one of those, what I learned though, is that I may leave that situation. I don't need to make friends. I don't need to be loved. But if what I do along this path creates real change, then that is okay. And I'm okay with that outcome. Because what needs to happen in this state is some real change. And so, ultimately, I do see myself in that position. I think that it is the path that I'm supposed to be on. But there may be something that happens along the way, a mustard seed that's planted with someone, or someone that I speak to, someone that hears this podcast today, that something resonates with them or maybe calls them to action in their own community. And we start that process of rising other leaders up to create the changes that need to happen in the state. And that's a beautiful thing. So, yeah.
Wow. It's refreshing to hear something like that.